Hello, friends. What a week it has been. Across Russia, chaos, confusion, and quiet despair mix into a strange picture that feels both absurd and tragic. In the dark corners of the country, people whisper, wait, and wonder what tomorrow will bring. And while officials on television promise stability, the scenes we witness tell an entirely different story. In Crimea, night falls heavy and uncertain. The air carries tension as people sit in darkness, unsure of where the next strike might land. The hum of generators replaces the sound of daily life. Streets, once lit and alive, now echo with silence. Locals share videos, frightened voices trembling behind the camera. You can almost feel that fear through the screen, an unease that grows with every passing minute. Meanwhile, far away in the Sverdlovsk region, another kind of darkness spreads. Not from explosions, but from neglect. In the city of Serov, residents gather their courage to make a desperate video appeal to President Putin himself. Elderly women, families with small children, and even veterans of the so-called special operation stand before the camera, reading carefully from pieces of paper. Their eyes are tired, their voices subdued, their message simple. Please, move us out of our collapsing homes. Cracked walls, leaking roofs, mold, cold air seeping through broken windows, this has become everyday life. These people aren't demanding luxury, just safety. Yet, as they plead for help, they know how it sounds. For years they've been told to wait, to be patient, to endure a little longer. And so they endure, always. At the same time, bizarre news appears from shops and markets across Russia. In some stores, a new product quietly arrives on the shelves. Sausage trimmings. Not a full meal, not even the usual product, but the leftovers, the scraps, packaged and sold for money. The kind of thing you'd expect to be thrown away now has a price tag. But when asked about it, workers shrug. We don't know why. That's what we have now. It's as if the absurdity has become normal, like something out of a strange film where reality bends until it stops making sense. And yet, life goes on. People buy, people cook, people hope. They make jokes to hide the frustration, because humor, however small, is sometimes the only protection left. And then, from Vladivostok, another story, one that sounds almost comical at first glance. Passengers of Route 55 sit quietly inside a bus, waiting. The driver refuses to start the engine. Not because of a breakdown, not because of traffic, but because, as he says, he needs to pray. I won't move until I've prayed, he insists. The passengers, bewildered, call local radio and complain, their voices a mix of confusion and disbelief. One woman says softly, "We've been waiting for 20 minutes. We're late for work."
What should we do? This strange patience of passengers, of citizens, of entire regions has become a defining picture of the country. A nation holding its breath, standing still, praying that something will change, but afraid to believe it ever will. And while all of this unfolds, thousands of kilometers away, the world watches. In Washington, in London, in Brussels, everyone seems to be talking about Russia again. But what they say, and how they say it, only adds to the growing tension. Stay tuned. In the next part, we'll uncover what lies behind these fragments, from the confusion in the Russian regions to the uneasy political dance on the world stage, where even the simplest questions leave powerful people speechless. Keep watching, subscribe, and don't miss what's coming next. Part 2. The picture becomes clearer and yet darker as we begin to see how all these fragments connect. What looks like isolated chaos is, in truth, part of a much larger pattern, one that stretches from small provincial towns to the highest levels of global politics. It's not just about broken homes or delayed buses. It's about a system that's cracking in slow motion while its architects pretend everything is under control. In the Sverdlovsk region, residents who begged for relocation still wait for an answer. Weeks pass, then months, and nothing changes. Officials promise commissions, inspections, and scheduled repairs,
but the only thing that arrives on schedule is another winter. The pipes freeze, the roofs sag, and the walls literally crumble under the weight of time. Instead of, people record new appeals, some almost word for word, as if repeating a ritual that brings no result. The videos circulate online, gaining sympathy but not action. The local administration releases short statements filled with familiar words. The issue is under review. But review doesn't mean resolution, and as every camera turns away, life continues. In the cold, in the dark, in resignation. Elsewhere, the absurdity grows bolder. In Saratov region, a snowstorm turns the highway into a trap. Hundreds of cars stand still, headlights cutting through the blizzard. Families run out of fuel, phones die. For 12 hours, no rescue teams appear. The authorities later call it a temporary logistical difficulty. Drivers call it something else: silence, abandonment, indifference. For many, that night becomes a symbol of how things work now. No one comes, and you just have to wait until the storm passes on its own. And while ordinary people struggle to survive the winter, political elites talk about resilience. On state television, anchors smile and speak of unity, of moral strength, of how the world is jealous of Russia's spirit. But behind those screens, the reality is colder. Prices keep rising, small businesses disappear, and public frustration grows quietly, almost invisibly. Abroad, the discussion takes a very different tone. In the United States, Senator Marco Rubio finds himself cornered by journalists pressing him for clarity. Is Vladimir Putin a war criminal? His hesitation fills the air like static. He avoids the direct answer, balancing on the edge of political caution. You can look at instances that could be described as war crimes, he says carefully, but our goal is to end the war. The reporter doesn't let go. So, is he a war criminal? Rubio's expression hardens. His assistant shifts uncomfortably beside him. The silence says more than the words ever could. This moment reveals something larger, a global uncertainty about how to deal with Russia. Diplomats call for dialogue, while soldiers keep dying on the front lines. Moscow's envoy to London, with chilling honesty, states, "We don't need any deal. We need Ukraine's full surrender." It's a phrase that cuts through every illusion of compromise. Russia isn't negotiating peace. It's buying time. It has done so before, in Chechnya, in Georgia, in Syria. Each pause in war becomes preparation for the next strike. Inside Russia, the propaganda shifts tone. Broadcasters begin to speak of temporary setbacks, of strategic patience. It's the same language used every time something goes wrong. Patience has become the country's national ideology. Patience instead of progress, endurance instead of change. And for millions, that endurance is all they have left. In Moscow, lights shine bright, restaurants stay open, and life continues for those untouched by the cold reality beyond the capital's borders. Yet even there, under the surface, anxiety hums. Quiet conversations in cafes, half-whispered questions. How long can this last? No one answers aloud, because everyone already knows. Back in the villages and small towns, people look for small signs of hope. A working lamp, a bus that finally arrives, a store with fresh bread. These moments, fragile and fleeting, hold more meaning than any speech on television. And while Russia turns inward, the world outside watches carefully. Sanctions tighten, economies adjust, alliances shift. Europe tries to balance between principle and pragmatism, while the United States faces election pressure. Every move is measured, every word weighed. But through it all, one truth remains. The war grinds on, consuming not only soldiers, but entire societies. The contrast grows unbearable. On one side, speeches about unity. On the other, people queuing for sausage scraps. On one channel, patriotic songs. On another screen, appeals from freezing families. Reality and rhetoric no longer meet. And yet,
the performance continues, because admitting the truth would mean dismantling the illusion. In this landscape of contradictions, the silence of power becomes louder than any siren. From Serov to Vladivostok, from Saratov to Crimea, the pattern repeats. No help, no change, only endurance. But beneath that endurance lies something else. A quiet shift, invisible but real. People are starting to talk differently, to think differently, to notice what used to be ignored. And that, perhaps, is the most dangerous thing of all. Because once people stop believing in the story they're told, the story itself begins to collapse. In the next part, we will dive deeper into how these cracks are spreading beyond the borders, how the world reacts, and what hidden consequences might soon unfold. Stay with us, subscribe, and listen closely, because what comes next may change the way you see this entire story. As the days pass, the threads of this story weave tighter, stretching far beyond the borders of one country. What began as local despair in Serov, as cold nights in Saratov, as silence in Crimea, becomes part of a broader and far more complex narrative, a struggle that touches global politics, energy, economy, and the very idea of truth itself. What happens in those small, forgotten towns is not isolated. It's the echo of something much larger, something that reverberates from Moscow to Washington, from Kiev to Berlin, from Brussels to Beijing. The consequences of Russia's ongoing war and its domestic decay are now rippling through the entire world. In Europe, governments debate how to continue supporting Ukraine while facing their own citizens' fatigue and rising costs. Energy prices fluctuate, markets shake with every headline, and yet, behind closed doors, diplomats insist there can be no return to the old world. The invasion changed everything. It redrew borders not only on maps, but in minds. Every decision, every policy now passes through this new reality. The awareness that aggression, if left unchecked, breeds only more of it. Inside Ukraine, cities like Kharkiv, Odessa and Dnipro still live under constant threat. The sound of air raid sirens has become as familiar as the morning news. People rebuild what's destroyed, again and again, because stopping is not an option. Volunteers deliver food, medics work without rest, teachers conduct lessons from basements. This quiet defiance has become the heartbeat of a nation. It's the kind of resilience that no speech can capture, but every visitor to Ukraine feels it immediately. The strength that comes not from power, but from purpose. Meanwhile, in Russia, life divides into two realities. There's the television version, proud, loud, confident, and there's the one outside your window. In Moscow, propaganda tells citizens that the world envies them, that sanctions are a test of strength, that the country is thriving under pressure. But in smaller towns, the cracks deepen. Factories cut shifts, salaries shrink, and inflation quietly erodes savings. In some regions, doctors leave hospitals because of unpaid wages. Teachers take extra jobs to survive. Even those who once avoided politics now begin to speak, not loudly, but clearly. The Kremlin's control over information remains strong, yet the internet still finds ways around censorship. Videos from Serov, from Vladivostok, from Saratov appear online faster than they can be erased. Citizens film everything: collapsing ceilings, endless queues, prayerful bus drivers, freezing highways. Each clip becomes a fragment of a larger truth, a truth that can't be hidden forever. In the international arena, Russia's allies grow uneasy. Beijing observes carefully, maintaining distance while pretending partnership. India balances between economic interest and moral stance. Turkey plays mediator and opportunist, sometimes both at once. The global chessboard shifts constantly, and behind every move lies the question: how long can this continue before something irreversible happens? Within the corridors of power, discussions turn darker. Western intelligence reports describe internal divisions within Russia's elite, businessmen frustrated by isolation, generals angry about battlefield losses, regional governors afraid of unrest. None of this surfaces on state TV, but inside the government, tension simmers. The promise of a short and victorious campaign has turned into a prolonged drain of resources, reputation, and human lives. And yet, despite the gloom,
hope flickers in unexpected places. Across Europe and North America, solidarity networks continue to grow. Artists, journalists, and volunteers from Warsaw to Toronto collect aid, spread truth, and remind the world that compassion still matters. The story of resistance, whether in a Ukrainian shelter or a Russian protest video, becomes a story of humanity refusing to surrender to fear. In Ukraine, winter once again approaches. Electricity remains unstable, but spirits are not. Children draw flags on shattered walls. Soldiers send messages home, promising to return. Civilians build small stoves, share bread, and joke that they've learned to live by candlelight better than anyone else in Europe. It's not romantic, it's survival. But within that survival lies dignity. In Moscow, meanwhile, the language of the state grows more desperate. Official statements declare that Russia stands united, even as millions quietly question what that unity means. Propaganda insists that everything is under control, but control over truth is slipping. When ordinary people begin to speak honestly about what they see, about collapsing buildings, freezing highways, empty stores, the illusion starts to break. Slowly, inevitably. In Washington, the debate continues. Should negotiations begin, or should the pressure increase? Some officials, like Senator Rubio, try to walk both lines, cautious enough not to close doors, but careful not to sound weak. Yet every attempt to balance feels hollow when missiles still fall and people still die. The reality is simple, even if politics tries to complicate it. There can be no peace built on denial, and while the powerful hesitate, the powerless act. A truck driver in Saratov helps stranded families. A teacher in Serov writes another letter to Moscow. A bus passenger in Vladivostok records her story and uploads it to the internet. Each of them, in their own way, breaks the silence. Together, they form a chorus. Quiet, trembling, but unmistakably human. This is the heart of the story. Not politics, not propaganda, but people. Tired, resilient, endlessly patient, and finally beginning to see through the fog. They may not march in the streets, but they are changing in ways that cannot be undone. And that is why this news matters. Because behind every cold apartment, every frozen road, every unanswered letter, there is a person who still believes that life should be better than this. That belief, once awakened, cannot be silenced again. So stay with us, watch closely, subscribe and listen, because the next chapter, the one that hasn't yet been written, will decide not only the fate of these people, but perhaps the direction of an entire era.